News. I'm your host this half hour, Peter Langell. There's a new report that stresses the need to fund infrastructure projects in Ontario to help the economy and to create jobs. But a long-term plan is needed. The Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario says the provincial government needs to invest more in order to capitalize on growth opportunities. Here to talk about what that report means is the Alliance Executive Director, Andy Manahan. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Well, I guess curious because here in the Windsor area, we're probably in a bit of a bubble. We're about to see one of the largest road construction projects in Ontario's history get underway, but it's a very different picture once you get out of the border zone, so to speak, the Windsor-Essex area. The bottom line, apparently, is that we do need stable long-term funding to help to protect the fragile economy and infrastructure. So what does this report say in sort of the broad terms?
Well, the report, first of all, says that the province has come forward with a 10-year capital plan, so that's very good news. And what this analysis does is essentially say that the province should stay the course, that there are some excellent economic benefits with infrastructure investment. And in fact, this is our second report of such a nature using macroeconomic modeling to take a look at infrastructure investment. We did one in 2010 that looked at Ontario as a whole, and so the one we just released is looking at Ontario data, and it came up with very similar results in terms of what needs to be done.
Now, when you talk about Ontario data, are you talking strictly about what the province is building through MTO and those kinds of projects?
It's broader than that. This includes investments made by the federal government as well as all municipalities together, but it's based on Statistics Canada data, which compiles all of that data into one kind of aggregate number.
So how much money is going to be spent and has been spent on infrastructure, say, in 2012?
The current estimate that the province has put forward is $12.8 billion for the current fiscal year for all types of infrastructure. So we're talking about roads, transit, water, hospitals, schools. So it's a very broad definition of infrastructure. In the Building Together 10-year plan that the province just came out with this past summer, they've proposed that $35 billion be spent over the next 3 years. And the good news is that during the election campaign, the other two opposition parties agreed that this was an appropriate level of infrastructure investment. So essentially what we like to do is just to remind everyone with this report that they have made these commitments because, as you know, we're in a deficit situation, and of course our finance minister is Dwight Duncan, and I know he gets it. He understands that infrastructure is important, but there's a lot of competing pressures for healthcare and education. So our message as those representing the construction sector is that if we start cutting back a little bit on infrastructure, we will be paying for lost jobs and lost economic growth.
Well, I wanted to talk about that because clearly one of the elements in this report is that the money that's spent on infrastructure, and whatever it be, roads, water, transit, it all has some impact on the economy and job creation.
And don't forget the bridge to the other side of the river.
Well, you know, let's not get into that one. We only have a few minutes here.
Okay.
That's a little bit more
we'll need 6
complex.
hours for that one.
Exactly. Can you draw a direct line between these infrastructure projects and the impact on the economy and job creation?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, unlike what other reports have done, for example, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who have been a great advocate for infrastructure, have said, you know, there's a $123 billion infrastructure gap across Canada, and that's a large number. So the people that did our report, Risk Analytica, thought that how do we personalize the risk so that people that are complaining about potholes in the roads and lack of buses, for example, get to understand what a lack of infrastructure investment actually means. So the firm actually that did the report tried to translate that into the impact on wages. And as you might imagine, those in a younger age group that are just entering the workforce have more to lose with that lack of infrastructure investment. And then these are economic terms, but they're talking about present value and so forth. But over the life of someone who's working till, let's say, age 65, it could be over $400,000 in lost wages because of lack of investment. So it's quite astounding, really.
Yeah, it's interesting when you draw it down to an individual. In terms of, you mentioned Ontario's deficit, and as you say, there will be a pressure to fund elsewhere and to perhaps chip away at the amount. And you're convinced and confident that Dwight Duncan, our finance minister, will in fact stick to his guns and stay with the level of funding that has been promised.
Yes, and in fact, we had a meeting with the infrastructure minister, Bob Chiarelli, last week, who again reinforced that that level of infrastructure is going to happen. I think what we're trying to say as an industry association is that we certainly have to be smart in how we spend that money and where we spend the money on, because if you make misallocations in those spending levels and put the money in the wrong area where maybe perhaps growth isn't going to happen, you're not going to get the economic or social bang for the buck that you might have otherwise.
If we look a province over to Quebec, can we see what kinds of things happen if you don't fund infrastructure construction and reconstruction properly?
Well, Laval is the obvious example in 2006 when certainly there wasn't proper asset management or inspection of that overpass, and lives were lost.
Well, there's that, and just, I drive through Quebec once or so a year, and you can just see that their infrastructure has not been maintained properly. There are areas, there's a tunnel in Montreal where there are a huge number of tiles off of the interior of that tunnel, those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. It can be a little scary, and so as a tourist going through, that's certainly a dissuasion. Is that one of the elements of the economic impact that, I don't know if you charted that, but that's certainly an element?
This report also takes a look at asset management, so maintaining what we already have. And a lot of municipalities during, tough economic times have cut back on repairing and rehabilitating things like bridges or water lines, and that does have economic consequences. We did a study a few years ago that showed that there are many municipalities across Ontario that have 15 to 25% water leakage rates.
Wow.
And so not only is that wasting, precious resource, but you're wasting energy and pumping water that never gets to homes or businesses.
True enough. Andy, thanks for joining us. It's a fascinating report and clearly very important to us here in the Windsor-Essex area. And
can I just add, if you'd like to take a look at the report, or your listenership would, you can go to rccao.com.
Excellent. Good. Thanks again, Andy. Great to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. That's Andy Manahan. He's Executive Director of the Alliance of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, who have that report. And, of course, we'll put a link on our website so you can find that report. Don't go away. Lots more to come on the afternoon news.
The Lynn Martin Show. Call us and let your voice be heard.